Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started. I know people are joining in, but we do have a very packed agenda, so we want to make sure that we get through and respect everyone's time. So greetings for whatever time of the day it is in your part of the world. I'm Gunjan Veda, Senior Advisor for Global Collaborative Research with the Movement for Community-Led Development. And it's my absolute honor to be facilitating today's event. Local is local, strengthening new tools for strengthening community-led development. This learning event is being supported by USAID through the implementer-led design, evidence, analysis, and learning activity. As I said, we do have a very, very packed agenda for the day with some very inspiring speakers who I know you're all very eager to listen to. We have some key findings from a study spanning 65 countries and some cool new tools. But before we start, some housekeeping announcements. So Zoom has now become the new way of life. I'm sure everybody is familiar with how it works. You would have noticed that we are running this event as a Zoom meeting and not a webinar. And that is because the sessions after the plenary, the workshop and the learning session are designed to be interactive and participatory. However, we request that all of you ensure at all times that you are muted. This event will be recorded. We will be circulating the recording and the key takeaways from the event to all registrants, and they will also be available on the Food Security Network website as well as the MCLD website. So if you do not want to be in the recording, please ensure that your camera is off. We are offering simultaneous translation in French for this event. People who registered for the French speaking channel would have received a step-by-step guide on how to access the interpretation channel. My colleague is also going to be putting the link into the chat window now. So if you need the French channel, that's the step-by-step guide on how to go about it. Finally, use the chat window only if you have some pressing questions or you have technical difficulties. If you have any questions about the research and other things, we will try and take them up in the breaks between the sessions. But during the plenary, we request you to not have conversations in the chat window unless you have a pressing question. So that's really the housekeeping stuff. So what is the purpose of today's meeting and what's the agenda like? John, if we can have the slides. Thank you. So the purpose of today's meeting, the pandemic has shown us that communities are the first responders in any crisis. When foreign workers and others had to leave from communities, it was the volunteers and leaders who stepped in to ensure that their neighbors were protected and the pandemic and the disease did not spread in their communities. But even before that, community-led development was getting traction. In 2019, the Movement for Community-Led Development, a group of over 70 INGOs and hundreds of local civil society organizations who believe that communities should be front and center in development, began a research to understand what happens when we do this. What we are going to share today, and today's event is designed for, is the findings from the first phase of this collaborative research spanning 173 programs across 65 countries. We are also going to share 2 new tools that we believe are going to be essential and helpful in strengthening the practice of community-led development. That's really why we've all gathered here today. Today's event is going to be in 3 parts. If we can move to the agenda slide, please. This is the plenary session, which is going to run for 60 minutes. As you can see, we are going to have a keynote address by President Joyce Banda. We are then going to share some key findings from our report and our study. We are going to have senior leaders from the World Bank and the Movement for Community-Led Development who are going to issue a call to action as well as speak about the practice of community-led development. We then go into a 10-minute break where we will try and address any pressing questions that emerge. The next session is going to be the workshop session. That's going to start at 9:10 Eastern time, US time. That is going to be a session where we are going to look at the CLD assessment tool that was collaboratively developed by movement partners. It's a workshop where we will look at what does the tool do, how do we implement it, how do we use it, what do the results mean. It's going to be interactive with breakout groups. We go into another 10-minute break, and then we come back for our final session for the day, which is on the CLD, on the quality appraisal tool for CLD evaluations. This is a tool that was designed to ensure that not only are our evaluations rigorous, but they're true to the principles of community-led development. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce a great champion for women's rights and community-led development, the former president of Malawi and the 1997 laureate of the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, Dr. Joyce Banda. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen for the invitation. I am thrilled that the Hunger Project has served in such a leadership role to promote and prioritize community-led development. In 1997, I was privileged to receive the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger jointly with President Chisano of Mozambique for my work at community level throughout Malawi. I have spent my entire adult life working with communities. I have grown to believe that leadership is a love affair. You must fall in love with the people yourself, and the people must fall in love with you. And in my case, it was the communities, rural people in a country where 85% of the people live in rural communities. I am proud to lend my voice to this workshop, very important workshop, to support the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and bring forward the power of the people at the local levels to transform their lives and those of their communities. My life's work has been grounded in community first, and each step of the way I have asked, is this good for community? To guide my intentions, actions, and efforts. I'm very grateful to the Movement for Community-Led Development and the Hunger Project for inviting me to this discussion today. I also want to thank the esteemed panelists for the perspectives they will bring, and to all attending for your time and commitment to this issue. I wish to everyone good health and continued resilience in the time of COVID-19 uncertainty. May we build back better and together. The topic of the role of community in transforming development outcomes is fundamental to progress. Local means local. After all, what a mother feeds her children occurs at the local level. When someone falls sick, and the first line of response is at the local level. When economies flourish or fail, it is the local economy that is the catalyst. I believe that development must be measured and defined through the effectiveness of community leadership in creating, shaping, driving, and sustaining change. Today, more than ever before, it is urgent. We must have a global mindset shift about the power of communities and the tools to improve locally led development programs and the investments and programming to support the aspirations and achievements of local communities. Having local communities at the table to shape and drive change today and into the future is not something that is simply nice to have, but rather it is something we must have. It is the only way to work if impact at scale is to be achieved. And if there is any doubt, let us look at the COVID-19 crisis, which has unleashed a health crisis and a crisis in education, hunger, economic development, and many more. COVID-19 put the rapid response and resilience of communities on display. It was not the national or global authorities who were solving the needs at the local level. It was not bilateral or multilateral agencies and donors acting swiftly to meet the needs of children and families. It wasn't the global development community that was leading the way. Who was it? It was everyday people at the local level, mothers and fathers and priests and the imams, farmers, community health workers and volunteers, teachers, local entrepreneurs, local officials, community leaders, and more. And if there's one critical case to make, it is this. Without local community and the ability and flexible funding for local leaders to quickly pivot, design, and implement highly responsive programs, development progress will not be achieved. Your task is formidable because if more than just about lip service, it is about making the case that community-led approaches work, that it is about shifting how the global development community sees its role in effecting change. And it is about having deep respect of communities and the courage to step away, relinquish control, and see the power of sustained transformation emerge at grassroots. But you must do it. We all must do it, because community-led development works when it is led locally, when external actors provide necessary tools and funding, and when we get out of the way so that communities can be the best that they can, on their terms and defined by their own aspirations. My entire career in civil society and my role as president of Malawi, I have focused on community-led and community-centered initiatives. In the year 2012 to 2014, I got angry about the fact that 1,200 women were dying giving birth. And by the time I got to be president, 675 women were dying per 100,000 live births. And I realized that the power was with communities and community leaders and traditional leaders. I mobilized the chiefs in Malawi, challenged them and told them that they were champions and my partners. For the first time in Malawi, people saw chiefs, male chiefs, talk about childbirth, maternal health. For the first time in Malawi, people saw male leaders champion maternal mortality. And with the support of the private sector, building 20 holding shelters in 20 hospitals in Malawi, and the chiefs themselves taking control of their communities and making their own bylaws and banning the giving of the delivering of babies by traditional health attendants, we were able to reduce maternal deaths by 32% in 2 years. And the African Union gave Malawi an award for that work. So as you can see, when we center on community and focus on impact at community level, it works. It is hard, complex, and highly contextualized work. But if the process and systems are right, community-led development will never fail. In order to achieve the ambitious goals of our future, we must harness the power and talent of community in the name of humanity, prosperity, and equity. And that is also the vision of Malawi. I'm proud to share that His Excellency the President, the current President of Malawi, leading civil society members and I have incorporated as a non-profit, non-government organization, what we are calling a community development initiative for Malawi. In the agreement that we drew when I stepped aside to stand for election in 2019, I asked the president to create a conducive environment for me to continue with my work at grassroots, to work with the communities to build what we are calling smart villages, whose main features will be energy, food and nutrition security, microfinance, agribusiness, clean water, environment, a school, and a clinic. I am the chair of Malawi's Community Development Initiative, this initiative I'm talking about. We are focused on the rural transformation of infrastructure, safety and security, and socio-economic outcomes through a dynamic, community-driven lens of development, actions, and investment. The lessons that we drew before taught us that when communities own a program, in a period of 2 years, we will be able to build a modern village in every district of the 29 districts that we have in Malawi. This initiative I'm talking about now builds from a foundation of rural development and deep deference to the fact that people know what is best for them. In 2012-2013, while in office, I initiated the establishment of the rural, what we call the Moose Transformation Trust. And this is the trust that I'm talking about. So as we embark upon your conversations today and discuss the insights from your survey and the best practices for community-led development to thrive and flourish, I would like to share a few points for your consideration. One, our world is, as is my beloved Africa, is young. It will be young people who are on the front lines to drive change, hold institutions accountable and innovate and speak out. And they have demonstrated over the past 10 years that the young people, particularly of Africa, will rise and raise their voices. And any leader who ignores their voices will be doing that at their own peril. Local development efforts must not only prioritize youth, but also enable them to inform and drive actions. Empowering young people with the right tools, support and training, and the need of young people, as well as the impact of community-led development efforts, must be successful with young people. It is youth who are the change makers of today and the keepers of tomorrow. If you prioritize young people, you have secured the future. We must lift the youth voice and grant them the platforms they deserve at global, regional, national, and local levels. We must embrace their power because youth have the answers. It is heartbreaking to see young people from Africa and Asia die trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea in search of job opportunities and better life. Number two, you may have heard me say this before, but it cannot be denied. Women make half of the world. And the last time I checked, they also brought into this world the other half. When community development is women-centered, just as the Hunger Project has done for decades, impact is sustained. A gender-specific lens with a prioritization of women goes beyond meeting the needs of women and seeing them as the powerful leaders that they are in their communities. The women-centered lens of community-led development must involve building networks and support systems to continue to propel women forward. There must be nothing about them without them. Women have disproportionately been left behind because they have been a part of a system that has failed them for far too long. Women know what does and what does not work, and rarely embrace what does. Therefore, they must be part of the discussions made about them in all structures in communities. We can rely on their leadership to efficiently and effectively reshape how we teach, provide healthcare, and grow food. To inspire their success, we must arm them with access to tools, technology, best practices, and mentorship. I have always asked, and maybe this is a question I can ask you, but I'm talking about Africa, which is where I know best. Why is it that a woman will till the land, grow the crop, tend the crop, harvest, store, process, cook, and eat last and least? I hope this forms part of your discussion today. Number three, for local development to flourish, we need funding. Investments in community-led development have been an afterthought or insufficient. But if we are to talk about doing away with the paternalism in development and the perspective, top-down ways of working, the funding landscape is critical. Funding for community development must not only increase, but also be flexible in nature. If you look at the recent humanitarian crisis, including the response to COVID-19, when funds are allocated and released for flexible and responsive use, it is the difference between life and death for community members. The questions we should ask why should this only be the case in the humanitarian or emergency context? Why should investment in community-led development with the opportunity to deploy funds flexibly be a matter of last resort? There is less waste, greater impact, and increased accountability at the local level, and it is time to flip the development paradigm so that development is funded through a bottom-up approach where there is respect for the knowledge, power, and ability of local people. I have always advocated for forging smart partnerships between international NGOs and local NGOs. We know better what to do and to change our situation. And therefore, when international NGOs come into the developing world, if they partner with local NGOs, they yield more. Number four, we must articulate, measure, and share the outcomes of community-led development. Community-led development is beyond a set of processes, models, and programs. What it is a way of working that can unleash sustained impact across sectors. From transforming education to building a safe and resilient food system, to ensuring that women and youth are able to access to reproductive health services, community-led development is the foundation from which any and all progress is possible. But we must convince the skeptics and build and leverage an evidence base that is grounded in economic and development impact. It must be more than stories that tug at the heartstrings. Those are important, but they are not enough. What is the cost benefit of locally focused development? What outcomes emerge when a woman or a young person is shaping and driving change? What is the economic and development impact of community-led development? These are the questions we must answer. The framing of the work backed with data and evidence is essential in order to make community-led development the dominant way of working, worthy of investment and undeniable. And last but not least, what will this network, you, the incredible leaders on the front lines, do with the knowledge that you amass? We must think strategically about the positioning of community-led development and demonstrate to global development leaders the desire and demand from your own network to work this way. The knowledge, data, position papers, and advocacy are all critical, but these efforts must ladder up to big wins. What are they? Have you articulated them clearly to the global development community, donor, to national policy makers, and more? The survey that you will discuss today is very illuminating and brings forward best practices and tools that are ready for others to learn from and use. Make this knowledge accessible and actionable so community partners are not recreating the wheel. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, where knowledge exists, we must propel it at all levels. In conclusion, we have a responsibility to reach communities directly where they are, where they live, where they work, and where they learn. It is development that is led by communities and supported by external experts that can enable sustained pathways towards prosperity. If there is one thing I know, it is that when our investments, policies, and programs reflect a set of values that are community-centered, impact is certain. When local people are part of the solution, they are an unstoppable force for justice, change, and achievement. This movement is inclusive, dedicated to local impact, the local leadership. It also acknowledges and welcomes many perspectives and experiences to the table. This work is urgent, and as it is the heart to prosperity and progress for all. I am inspired and encouraged by the work of each one of you. I remain steadfast in my commitment to community-led actions, and I'm very appreciative of the movement for community-led development. I am truly honored to be part of this discussion. As John, you will recall that in 1997, when in my speech, while accepting the Africa Prize for Leadership for the Sustainable End of Hunger, I said, I will work and continue to work until the job is done. And you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, have a partner in me. Thank you.
Thank you, President Banda, for those really inspiring words and thought-provoking questions. People do indeed know what is best for them, and it has been our endeavor to make sure that the work that we do at the movement is accessible and actionable. You know, it is, as you noted, the global mindset shift is a very formidable task, but together we can shift the power in international development and ensure that communities are front and center. So thank you very much. And now I would like to invite John Coonrod, the Executive Vice President of the Hunger Project and the co-founder of the Movement for Community-Led Development, to tell us a little more about this movement that President Banda also spoke about. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gunjan. It's just a great joy to be here at the largest ever community-led development gathering. I'm particularly pleased that we'll be hearing shortly from some of my colleagues in international NGOs, including the co-founder, Pierre Ferrari. If you want to know why it's called Movement, it's that Pierre voted for it to be called Movement. A lot of what President Banda has said, I now don't need to say. She beautifully summed up our passion to shift the power. I'm going to share a few slides to address her point about being strategic about it. the share application. Bingo. Okay. So just over 5 years ago, many of us gathered in New York to launch the Sustainable Development Goals. And on that day, September 25th, 2015, Pope Francis, and really paraphrasing Mahatma Gandhi, said it's all well and good for you to set these goals, but will it mean anything to her? So the young mother with a baby on her back, if there aren't quality public services and responsive local government that listen to her, that give her a pathway to her aspirations, it's not going to be achieved. So we set up this movement recognizing that at least 12 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals actually could not be achieved unless there was an integrated local strategy. And we set 5 goals that very much align with what President Banda was saying. Our goal to ensure there's voice and agency for women, youth, and marginalized group in local decisions, that there's adequate community finance, and at least 20% of public resources need to be in the hands of communities, that there's good local governance with participatory public forums, transparency, democratic elections at the local level. Altogether, that should produce quality public services, schools, health clinics, and most importantly, that will empower communities to be resilient. And as she noted, and as Gunjan noted, resilience is a community attribute, and this pandemic has really proven that to us. So as Gunjan mentioned, there are 72 international NGOs that have joined this movement. And more importantly, there are more than 1,000 community-based organizations and local and national NGOs that are part of this movement in national chapters. The way the movement works and is that what we're hearing about today, this little yellow box that says evidence, that will both feed evidence into and learnings from our national chapters. Those national chapters create a shared agenda, and they form partnerships for advocacy to engage with national governments to really decentralize and push resources to the community level, as well as facilitation partnerships to mobilize communities and work with them as they achieve communities that are self-reliant. Initially, we are seeing results in terms of improved capacity and commitment by communities. And our ultimate goal is to have national programs that support all the communities in each country. And only when that happens, we believe, will you really see the rapid achievement of all the Sustainable Development Goals. There are countries that have done this. Often they start with moving from individual NGO projects to a consortium with a larger amount of money at a level that can kind of get the excitement of government partnership. And then a government, civil society, bilaterally funded pilot or multilaterally funded pilot program, maybe for 10% of the villages, and then a national scale up to a full national program. We've seen in Indonesia, for example, there was a level where the World Bank was funding community-led development at $80 million, and now that's a $7 billion a year line item in the Indonesian national government. So this is what we're going for, getting groups together, working together as a consortium, partnering with government, and getting to scale. So that, I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to pose a question to Gunjan. Today is about revealing that research that's been underway. So I'd like to ask Gunjan, tell us what you have been doing, all these awesome partners of yours around the world.
Thank you, John. Yes, so as you noted, one of the things that the movement set out to do was to advocate for community-led development at the national and international level. But then, as President Banda noted, it's a formidable task. It's not easy to convince people. And so in 2019, we at the movement started an exercise to understand what happens when we put people and communities front and center in development. And that's really what the research was. Now, John, if you can put up the slides, I do have to confess that when we started out on this journey, this is not what we were planning. This huge collaborative multi-country effort. I think we pretty much imagined that I would be sitting in an office chair or a home office as we have it now and going through evaluation reports from partner organizations. But as we started speaking to our partners, we realized that the task is even more formidable than we imagined for two reasons. One, there was no common understanding of what CLD is. It meant different things to different people. And second, in our evaluation reports, the hundreds of them that we have, we do not really look at this transformative human change process that CLD leads to, the process that President Banda referred to. And so really we became what you see on the right side. We said, this requires something much bigger. We had to revise our research questions and we invited partners to join us. 35 people from 23 different organizations volunteered. And I use the term volunteered very, very consciously because this research had no external funding. This research was done by committed professionals whose images and names you saw on the slides earlier before we went into the plenary, who put in all of those hundreds of hours over and above their everyday work. And if we can go to the next slide, John, what were we trying to do? Well, we identified three questions. Where has community-led development worked? How, why, for whom, under what circumstances, and also where has it not worked? What has been the impact of CLD programming on development outcomes? And finally, how do we adapt existing evaluation methods to capture the complexity of community-led development? Because it's not a simple straight line linear process as all of us who do community-led development know. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that we realized that in order to answer our research questions, we had to start at the foundations. We had to define, understand what is it that we were talking about when we said community-led development? What were organizations doing when they said they were doing CLD? And to the best of our knowledge, there was no information, no mapping exercise that told us this. What is it that we expect community-led development to do? And finally, how do we capture this impact? So we worked through three subgroups, but in addition to that, we had a wonderful team of advisors, practitioner experts, academic experts, who again put in a lot of time to guide us, to ensure quality control, to look at the methodology, because they too were committed to community-led development. So that's really what we've been doing over the last, couple of years, John. John, you're muted.
So Gunjan, what are we going to see today and why is it important?
Thank you, John. So what are we going to see today? Like I said, we've started to figure out, what do organizations mean when they say they're doing community-led development? What are they doing as part of this work? And so we got over 400 reports. We looked at 173 programs across 65 countries. So what we are unveiling today is a draft report with those findings. You will find the link in the chat boxes soon for the report and the tools. Now, also, I have to say that this is an emergent research. We did not set out to create tools for everyone. But in November, when we released of 2019, when we shared the instruments that we had created for our research, we heard our partners say, well, this is wonderful. We need these tools, for ourselves in our work. And so we went back, we piloted, and we tested. And what we are releasing now today are 2 tools in English and French. We will have other language translations coming soon. These tools are designed to help us improve the practice of community-led development. They are tools that can be used by practitioners, the CLD assessment tool, to see where are they in their community-led development journey. And then we have the quality appraisal tool, which is designed for us to ensure, President Banda said, you know, we have to make this knowledge accessible and actionable. So these are 13 simple questions on how do you ensure evaluation reports are not just rigorous, but they are true to the principles of CLD. If you go to the next slide, please, John. So these are the countries that have been covered in the study. And what makes it really unique and why this is important, John, as you asked, is because this is the first step towards developing a common language, a common understanding, standards for CLD. And this is collaborative. It's not somebody has done it on their own. It started out with 1 person and then a 35-member research team. Over the last couple of years, it has seen people from all over the world within the movement and outside testing, piloting, using these tools, providing feedback. And that is what makes it special and important.
Aha. So what's next for collaborative research?
Well, if you go to the next slide, you can see what's next for us. So today, what we are going to share with you, and very soon my colleagues are going to share some key findings from this research. What we know that everybody is really interested is in the impact question. So right now we have underway impact of community-led development and food security, or INCLUDE, a project with support from USAID under the implementer-led design, evidence, analysis, and learning activity. We are undertaking a rapid realist review, essentially a review to look at how, why, and under what circumstances the 2 key attributes of community-led development, facilitation and community leadership, lead to improved equity and resilience. And you can expect for us to come back in August this year to share results from this. So with this, I would actually, because this is a collaborative research, I would like to invite 2 members from our research team, Nellie Mecklenburg from the Institute of State Effectiveness and Eileen Cloet from Outreach International, to share some key findings with us. Nellie and Eileen, over to you.
Thank you, Gunjan. John, I'm going to ask that you move on to the next slide, please. And then to the next one, please. Thank you. So as Gunjan mentioned, in this report that you're about to hear about now, we assess the presence of CLD characteristics and how they vary with context, program length, funding, focus, and activities. 2 questions guided our inquiry. First, what are organizations doing as part of their CLD programming? And then secondly, how does the nature of CLD program vary with context? Please do keep in mind, we did not look at impact. Instead, we wanted to understand the CLD practices of organizations so that we can create a landscape of CLD programming. Next slide, please. To do this, we collected, as Gunjan mentioned, 419 documents from 29 program partners, or MCLD members rather. We removed duplicates, meta reviews, baseline studies, and so on. And then we landed on a final sample of 173 reports. We then used data extraction tools that included sections on program information and characteristics, and then lastly, a CLD rubric. From this rubric, we identified 11 CLD characteristics, which we then collapsed into 9 dimensions. And you can learn more about the rubric and these dimensions in the next section on the CLD assessment tool. John, if you could move on to the next slide, that's just a brief overview, and apologies, this is rather quick, but that is what the dimensions then look like. Next slide, please, John. As always, there are always some limitations when it comes to research. First of all, this is not a representative sample of all CLD. Instead, it is samples submitted by only NCLD members. And then in addition to that, the reports are mostly all actually in English, which then obviously excludes other programs and reports. And then lastly, the documents also vary a lot in their focus and purpose, and might therefore not reflect a program's CLD intent. So it is important to remember that absence in this sense of evidence does not mean evidence of absence. So if things are not included in a report, it doesn't mean that those things are not present within a program. Nelly, over to you.
Thanks, Aline. So John, you can go to the next slide. So from this initial review of these 173 reports, a number of findings emerged on the scope and the type of programming, as well as what characteristics, or in this case, dimensions, were more or less documented. One thing that came through is that programming duration matters. On average, the reviewed programs ran for just over 5 years, but there was a correlation between length of the program and the presence of these CLD dimensions. On average, shorter programs, those under 3 years, had fewer CLD dimensions, while those that ran for over 7 years had more. Next slide, John. The review also, excuse me. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry, thanks. The review also identified 6 types of programmings in terms of their main focus and activity, and they're up on the screen. They were service delivery, agency and empowerment, service delivery and agency, capacity development, which had the most representation among the programs, policy advocacy, and social accountability. And then you can go back 1 slide, John, sorry about that. So on average, the documents in the study showed about 6 out of the 9 dimensions from the rubric. However, some of these CLD dimensions were reported on much more than others. As you can see in this spider diagram, 97% of the reports mentioned facilitation and 93% alluded to participation, inclusion, and voice. On the other hand, very few, only around 1/3, discussed accountability, sustainability, or community-led monitoring and evaluation. But we should note that the presence of a dimension does not reflect the quality or the degree of that dimension in the programming. While a lot of the reports noted that facilitation was part of the programming, that did not mean that they described what they meant by facilitation. For example, to what extent local communities are taking the lead in the facilitation, or whether the facilitation takes into consideration and responds to the needs of the local communities. For example, in this case, only 11% of the reports included evidence that facilitation was flexible to community needs. Next slide, John. Well, as we saw in that last slide, there's a high presence of participation in the reports, but in most of the programs, that seemed to actually be limited to just women or people living in extreme poverty. There was a lot less mention, significantly less mention of other marginalized groups like LGBTQ or people with disabilities or ethnic or religious minorities. We should also note that more than 1/3 of the program documents still did not mention a gender component in their programming, which is surprising given our sector. Overall, though, the emphasis on women's participation also raises some questions about how much of women's times in these communities we're asking for in order to participate in these programs. And then also, perhaps not surprisingly, programs that had youth participants had significantly higher presence of CLD dimensions. John, you can go to the next slide. In terms of program focus, there's also some interesting observations on the correlation between programs' focus and reported CLD dimensions. For example, again, here in this spider diagram, which is a little hard to read, health-focused and governance programs reported on average more, about 17% more CLD dimensions, while programs focused on economic empowerment reported less, as you can see. And there could be any number of reasons for this, including the length of the programming or reporting requirements for different program focuses or donor interest. But finally, one thing that emerged very clearly from the study was that CLD is being practiced across a huge variety of socioeconomic and political contexts in both humanitarian and development programming and in programs of varying scale. John, next slide. There we go. Next slide. Thank you. In brief, as Gunjan said, this is just the beginning. There's a lot more work to do to really understand the relationships between these correlations. And as we said, importantly, how it affects program impact, which we haven't looked at yet. That may include through primary research to do deeper dives on these initial findings, ensuring community voices are part of the research process, testing these dimensions and the tools we've developed for them to see if they align with the programming that's actually happening in the field and to see if they're viable to use in our programs, as well as potentially building a database to share information about CLD programming so that we're all better informed about our own sector. And all of this will really require the help and input of partners like all of yourselves to take this work forward. And finally, before I close, most importantly, at this point, what this tells us really is about what we're prioritizing in our reporting. The lack of reporting of CLD characteristics, as Aline said, does not mean they aren't there, but it does mean that our evaluations aren't prioritizing those metrics, and perhaps our funders aren't either. So how can we think about how we can be more conscious about CLD principles in our reporting, and what tools and what common language do we need to evaluate it and demonstrate the need for community-led development and its value? This tool that we'll be looking at later that the movement has developed is just one step in that direction, but now it's up to all of you and all of us and other practitioners globally to use these tools and to provide feedback, a plug for feedback, so that they can become more effective for capturing what's really happening. And ultimately, these tools will only be as good and effective as we all make them. So with that, over to you, Gunjan.
Thank you, Elaine and Nelly. I'm sure people will have questions about this, and we will, take them up later on, maybe in between breaks, but you can always write to us. We have shared our contact details, and we'll be happy to engage and share more about the research. But now it is my absolute pleasure to invite Susan Wong, who is the global lead for community-driven development at the World Bank. The reason it is particularly thrilling to have her here with us today is that Susan was the person who seeded the idea for this research. She threw this challenge at us. So Susan, have we delivered, and what's next for CLD? Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, John, Gunja, and the rest of the colleagues here. First of all, I really want to thank you for inviting me to this exciting event. It's wonderful to see so many people tune in. Let me also thank President Banda for the very inspirational opening.
Muted.
Susan, you're muted.
Susan, you have to unmute. There.
Going again, trying.
Yeah, you've got it.
Got it. Okay, sorry, I unmuted. Did you catch the beginning or not yet?
Yes, just the last 3 words we missed.
Okay, great, thanks. So first of all, really congratulations to the entire team for this important research. I'm really struck with the breadth of the work that's been done to date across, I think Gunjan mentioned 173 programs in 65 countries. So this may be one of the largest, if not the largest study of this nature that I've seen on CLD and community-led development. So I want to focus my comments on 2 main questions. First is, why is this research important? Okay, and then secondly, I was asked to address the issue of how to use this research and what's the next step forward. So first, in terms of why is this research important, where I work at the World Bank, we will certainly be benefiting from this work. Why? Because many of our community-driven development programs have started by looking at what the NGO community is already doing in country and learning from those CLD experiences. I thought John's graph that he shows of how the CLD developed to become, small pilots to then scale up, to then be incorporated into either policies or legislation or major national programs was really well done and indicative of what we've seen in many countries around the world. And because of efforts like that, the World Bank currently works in over 320 projects in 90 countries around the world. We're basically supporting over $33 billion in bank financing for community-driven development, or what you call community-led development. And 2/3 of these programs work in the poorest countries around the world, About 20 or 30% of them are in fragile and conflict states. So it's really important that we learn from each other and we grow as a community of practitioners and learners. So as Gunjan mentioned in the outset, I think the CLD's work is even more relevant and potent today in the midst of this global COVID pandemic and rising inequality. So we don't need to look very far to see how the civil society movement and communities have come together to help each other during this crisis, from community food banks and civil society elderly care groups in Washington, D.C., where I live, to even women's groups in India, Indonesia, that are mobilizing to ensure that vulnerable groups really do receive emergency assistance, that the poor, the disabled, and others do receive the assistance and have the information that they need. So across the globe, the bank has seen existing community programs move very quickly to deliver assistance in the last mile, to effectively target the most vulnerable and reach the last mile. Because this crisis has really shown that it's all about the ability to deliver, to use those community platforms, to use the civil society networks that all of you have, to make sure that we're able to send out information, correct information, dispel myths, and deliver services. So I really hope that the CLD movement continues to partner with governments and international organizations such as the World Bank to engage communities, provide accurate health and assistance information, and work together on delivering these resources, especially for the last mile service delivery. So this study really comes at a critical time, and I was very interested in it, especially because as a bank, we're really looking into this whole issue now of how do all of us collectively, be it government, civil society, or international organizations, prioritize a more inclusive and green recovery. I think that's the central question right now on many international development organizations' minds. Okay, how do we build back better? Not just the old systems of inequality, okay, but a new systems. What does it mean to be more inclusive and green in our recovery models? So I think this study goes a long way in trying to help answer some of these questions. So just turning specifically to the findings of the study, I see three of the main strengths are as follows. First, I really liked the study's close examination of the project design and the similarities and differences. I can't tell you how many times, and I'm a monitoring and evaluation expert by technical training, how many times I've spoken to evaluators and I asked them, what was the project? What did the project actually do? And they actually can't tell me that. So they've evaluated a project based on preset indicators, and yet they really didn't look into exact design of the project. What are the interventions? And what I really like about this study is that you kind of, gone into the nuance of this, picked apart, unpacked, what does it mean on CLD interventions? So I really think that's a very good strength of the study. So that corrects it in practice, and I hope when you head into the impacts, we'll also see that differentiation of what interventions mean. Second, I really like the participatory nature in the way the work is done. Kudos to all of you. I know all of you are busy, committed development professionals. So I really applaud all the organizations that volunteered time and staff effort, especially during this busy period with COVID, to help with this endeavor. I think it's a Herculean task and led by an international community of practice, community of practitioners. So what could be better than that? Third, I think the study raises the importance of reflecting and documenting exactly what we mean by CLD. So the last point that the researchers mentioned, it's very important to document what we're learning, what we're doing, and also what are we evaluating. So indicators to measure participation, community and women's engagement and empowerment. How do we measure social cohesion and trust in government? All of those issues, which are fundamental to CLD designs in a lot of cases, we really need to unpack and carefully think through, not only how do we measure them, but what do they mean in a local context when they're translated into local situations, be it in fragile states, in poor countries, in left behind regions of the country. So I really appreciate very much the tool that was developed for this line of research. I think that's going to be a very potent tool, and I hope many practitioners use it. So just to conclude, I think this phase of the study is extremely valuable. I think it's been a great learning experience, and I really look forward to the next phase, looking at results and impacts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your inspiring words, for your call to action and for constantly, challenging us and inspiring us to take on research like this. So we hope that you will continue to champion CLD in all the forums where you are, just like you do now. And now it is my absolute pleasure to invite. So you've been hearing about these number of organizations throughout the plenary that are part of this movement, the leaders and all of us, all the others who have been instrumental in creating this movement. So today, now we are going to have a call to action from 5 movement leaders. May I first invite Pierre Ferrari, CEO of Heifer International.
Thank you. This is Pierre. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to address this group. I was just thinking, John, you go back a few years where we started, and today we have this extraordinary meeting. And I just got to give a shout out to John. I mean, you've been incredibly persistent and committed to doing this, and I'm just in awe and inspired by your work. So thank you for that. Really amazing. So we at Heifer International have been committed to community-led development for 75 years from the very beginning. And we know it works. The impact and sustainability of permanence of community values and collective action cannot be underestimated. Unfortunately, it often is. In practice, we know that without community cohesion, the likelihood of successful development, in our experience, is close to zero. And yet this belief is generally not supported with adequate funding. That's one of the issues we face. I don't know if everyone else faces that, but there's a lot of words to support the idea of community-led development, but when it comes to the money, when it comes to the money doesn't seem to appear. Anyway, I would like to bring some intellectual and sort of research heft to the assertion that community-led development really works. I suspect that many of us have heard of Garrett Hardin's The Tragedy of the Commons, his paper that was written back in the 70s. His idea have permeated economic thinking for far too long. He believed that solutions to the inevitable destruction of the commons, and we can discuss commons, we don't have time now, would be to privatize the commons to individual owners or allow the government to police its use. The current calls for the private sector, for example, to be involved in all development activities, but a loud echo of Hardin's work. There are other approaches. Community-led development is obviously one. And I'm going to suggest I don't have much time, but I'm going to suggest an intellectual, I think, powerhouse. And I don't know how many of you have heard or are aware of the brilliant work of Elinor Ostrom. She won the Nobel Prize, the Economic Nobel Prize in 2009. She worked for decades exploring communities. She sought to understand how social ecological system worked so they can be maintained in a sustainable way. She has some very practical advice, and Gunjan, I think this may be helpful in terms of improving our tools. She has 8 rules, and I'm not going to go through them now, to optimize success. Some of her work was funded by USAID, by the way. A good summary of her work can be found in a 2009 paper she authored called A General Framework for Analyzing Sustainability in Social Political System. It's worth a read. It's worth understanding what she did and bringing into our conversations to eliminate our work. So I wanted to end up my conversation on bringing Elinor's work to our thinking because it is so vital. And she's got decades of analysis, not just an intellectual exercise somewhere in Indiana University, but actually field work. And it might be worth everyone to be inspired by her work, actually. So thank you all for your time. John, you are just a fabulous guy. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pierre. And now it is my pleasure to invite Anne Coons, Senior Vice President, Technical Assistant from Relief International. Anne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gunjan. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
So hello and welcome everybody. My name is Ann Kuntz, and as Gunjan said, I'm the Senior Vice President with Relief International. Relief International provides humanitarian and development programming in 16 countries across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And we partner with communities to improve health and nutrition, water, sanitation and hygiene, education, livelihoods, and protection. A majority of our community participants are refugees and internally displaced persons, in which the basic concept of community for these individuals and families has been disrupted or is in flux. Relief International is proud and honored to be a part of the movement for community-led development. But to fully realize the community-led development goals, we appreciate that Relief International and all of us have to change our mindset and approaches. Since Relief International has increased its presence and role within the CLD movement, this focus on community has only deepened for us. We have taken steps to change not only our words and actions, but to make it happen. I just want to share a few examples with you all. RI's 2015 to 2020 strategic vision included local participation as a fundamental. This included local partners, stakeholders, and communities. And approximately 98% of our more than 5,000 global staff are drawn from local communities. We focused our systems approach to better understand with communities how healthcare, WARSH, education, food and livelihood systems can improve and be more resilient by treating community members as the key agents of change. We learned how to listen better, not assume, and take leads from women, men, children, youth, and elders in our communities. In 2019, RI made an organizational decision to work to remove the word beneficiary from our work, something that is a staple in the humanitarian field. This was an important step to encourage all of our staff members to see our communities as equal partners and not simply receivers of aid and services. In 2020, we completed our organizational assessment under the core humanitarian standards and mapped these to the CLD movement commitments, learning that the two approaches complement each other, but actually giving us a roadmap for improvement and showing us a strong spotlight into the actions that we still must take and the improvements that are needed. Finally, two key components of RI's recently developed 2021 to 2025 strategy adhere very closely to the principles of CLD, communities at the center and accountability. These two components will allow us to continually improve on the CLD approach in our work and put communities, and communities will have a stronger voice in decisions that impact their lives, and they will be able to hold us accountable to those standards. Relief International looks forward to learning from you all today, and I've already been inspired by the, I'd say the teasers and the summaries of CLD's progress, research, and tools development, and how these can help all of us to better learn from the communities we partner with to globally address the most complex drivers of conflict, climate change, injustice, and poverty. Thank you all very much. And it's been an honor to be able to speak with you all. And I look forward to learning more from all of you today.
Thank you, Anne. Now may I invite Erta Nkosi. Erta is the country director of Malawi for Core Africa. He is also the coordinator of the MCLD Malawi chapter. Erta, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity just to thank everyone who is on this call today. And most importantly, to thank our president, Joyce Banda, who had a wonderful speech and has inspired me as a Malawian in the work that we're all doing with community-led development. I'd like to start off by saying that community-led development is a crucial part for all of us. And as the country lead for the chapter for community-led development in Malawi, where we have over 20 different organizations that are a part of this. All of us are working towards one goal. As the country director for Core Africa Malawi, we are an organization that is truly and strongly pushing towards ensuring that we empower the communities that we serve. Through the direction of our executive director and founder, Liz Fanning, who is also a recipient of the 2019 Sergeant Shriver Award for Distinguished Humanitarian Service, we are indebted to her for the work that she has started with Core Africa. Just to share with you as to what Core Africa NGO that is focused on developing young professionals in Africa to help address 3 critical areas of need. Firstly, to ensure that we are providing professional and personal development opportunities for the next generation of African leaders. As you may have heard from our president, Joyce Banda, the African leaders are really the youth of this continent, and also, I would say, around the world. As Core Africa, we also want to try and fight the persistent poverty and economic challenges across the continent by mobilizing young people to empower rural villages through facilitating community-led development. And through the work that we're doing as Core Africa, we would like to promote collaborative and more effective linkages in Africa. Similarly, as the community-led development, I would like to encourage all members here that the tools that we're using are really an inspiration and also a glass-breaking barrier, that where we will be able to pass through the barriers that we have faced to be able to do a few things. And I'd like to elaborate on some of these things. Most importantly to us is accountability for the work that we do as community-led development organizations. We also need to ensure that we are linking ourselves as community-led organizations to subnational governments, to ensure that we are partnering with the governments in country to be able to understand what impact are we actually doing in communities when we talk about community-led development. Exit strategies as organizations that leave development areas, are we really leaving these areas to be sustainable and to be resilient? How do we assess that we have actually made an impact in these areas? And most importantly, the M&E practices that we have. So in conclusion, I would like to encourage all of us to be a part of this tool that is being introduced today. As Core Africa would like to continue to learn from all of you as well, so that together we can make an impact in the world that we live. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And now may I call upon Lisa Nord, the acting CEO of the Hunger Project, which is also the Global Secretariat for the movement. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Gunjan, and greetings all. It's really wonderful to be here. The Hunger Project believes that gender-focused community-led development is the key to ending hunger and poverty. And this is why in 2015, we co-founded the Movement for Community-Led Development, along with Pierre Ferrari here, and many of you also present here today. This is why also, 5 years later, we continue to serve as the movement's global secretariat, and we continue to put our resources into strengthening this growing global collaboration. Collaboration and connection, these are the foundations on which the Hunger Project is built. And I want to congratulate the entire research team, all the individuals and organizations from all over the world who have been a part of this collaborative effort. This collaboration is what makes the tools unique, because it means this is not just my vision of community-led development or just your vision. This is our collective vision, and these tools provide us with a path to attain our shared vision. So here at the Hunger Project, we remain committed to using these tools to strengthen our work. We have developed a checklist based on the tools to guide every evaluation that we do from here on out across all our different countries. And I invite you to do the same. These tools are living instruments and they are only as good as we make them. So please use them and provide the team with feedback to improve them so that together we can continue to strengthen the work that we all do, the ideals we all stand for, and the evidence of their impact. I know we are committed to doing so at the Hunger Project. This meeting does not end here, nor does our journey. I am so looking forward to seeing what we can all achieve together. Back to you, Gunjan.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And now may I invite Margaret Schuler, the Senior Vice President, International Development from World Vision. Margaret, the floor is yours.
Greetings to everyone around the world. What a wonderful initiative and event we are having today. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you. World Vision is proud to be a part of MCLD collaborative efforts, along with the other organizations represented here today. Our investment in this important body of work included countless hours leading or participating in the movements, working groups, and providing our own evaluations to use in the research. This investment in time, provision of data sources, and capacity development of partners reflects our commitment to collective learning as we celebrate and wrestle with the issue of how to improve community-led development so that it becomes transformative for us all. We believe that poverty is surmountable, a surmountable condition of deprivation, vulnerability, and broken relationships, which threatens human survival, involves unacceptable human suffering, and prevents people from fulfilling their full potential. We also reject seeing ourselves as saviors in the communities where we work. Our response to poverty and vulnerability is what we refer to as transformational development, a calling to promote human transformation and seek justice in partnership with others. We see transformational development as both a vision and a process. That vision for us is life in all its fullness for every child, girls and boys, families, communities, and societies living with dignity, justice, peace, and hope. The process is a transformational journey of shared learning and holistic change through which people discover purpose as they work with others to address injustice and improve and sustain child well-being. World Vision affirms the importance of community systems in creating durable solutions to poverty. We are committed to fostering gender and social inclusion within these systems, promoting equal access, decision-making, participation, and well-being for all. We actively work within these systems to strengthen governance, policies, and structures at local, regional, and national levels to make them more transparent, accountable, and effective in delivering on the rights of their citizens. And we work alongside citizens, communities, and civil society organizations to equip and enable them to engage in collaborative, constructive dialogue with each other and their officials, leaders, and service providers. But we also seek to enable donors and supporters in their own transformation as they participate with communities to improve the lives of their children. It is in this spirit of transformational development that I wholeheartedly welcome the creation of standards for community-led development to help donors, implementers, and civil society actors hold each other accountable to learn and improve our joint work. I urge other organizations and donors to do the same. Use these tools, share your feedback, and let us together create standards that we can aspire to and hold ourselves accountable for. It is my hope that we can continue to share and learn from each other as we will today, so that we can drive progress towards putting communities in charge of the positive change they seek. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And what an amazing group. This is the collaboration that we've been talking about today. I know we've run over time, but this is what happens when you have so many inspiring people together in a short session. It is going to be impossible to thank each and everyone who has been involved with this effort. So I'm not even going to attempt it. But I do want to say a big thank you to President Banda, to Susan, to all the movement leaders, to USAID Ideal who are sponsoring this event, John Coonrod, the advisory group, all the participating organizations, our interns, student researchers, the MCLD Secretariat team, and above all, our research team. Thank you for everything that you've done. And thank you for everything that you continue to do, because together we can strengthen community-led development. And thank you to everybody who is here. As Lisa said, the event does not end here, but this is the end of the plenary session. We are cutting the break by 5 minutes. So you will have a 5-minute break. The chat feature is now free for use. So if you have questions, feedback, comments, as we go through the other sessions, please put them in the chat. We will try and address them as best as we can. We are at 9:20 Eastern Time, and in exactly 9:25 Eastern Time, we will begin the workshop on the CLD assessment tool. So we will see you all there. Also, it's going to be the same link, so we are going to be here. You can just mute yourselves if you like, switch off the video, and come back in 5 minutes. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back. We are going to start the next session because we are already running behind time and we want to ensure that everyone has enough time to engage with the tools. So this session is on the CLD assessment tool, and we're going to hear from the team about the tool, about how to use it. And we're actually going to do breakout groups where each of you will try and use a portion of this tool. And then we'll come back. As we go through this, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, put it in the chat window. Even if we are not able to, answer them right away, we are noting all the questions and we will respond to all of you and your queries. So you are being heard, definitely. Also, we have a French breakout group. So if you would like to be in the French breakout group, please put your name into the chat saying French group so that we can ensure that language is not an obstacle into participation. Can we go to the next slide, please, John? So before we go into the session, as I mentioned initially in the plenary session, this has been a really collaborative effort. And we wanted to make sure that you see all the faces, the whole team that has been working for over 2 years, almost 2 years now, in creating this tool, in building this tool, as you hear about the process. You see the names there, the slides there, from a whole range of organizations. And you can learn more about this team, fabulous, fabulous team, on our website on the page for the scoping group. I also want to say here that this tool, which was developed by this wonderful group of people that you see here, was tested, piloted, and got feedback from a number of other organizations and people, both within the movement and outside. And we want to thank all of you, as well as our advisors, who were so instrumental in ensuring that this tool that we put out is actually useful and applicable and accessible and actionable. And we hope that you will help us to make it better. With this, I want to turn it over to Holta Trandafali from World Vision, excuse me, chaired the group. So Holta, over to you. Take us through this tool. What is it? What are we talking about? How was it developed? And why is it important?
Thank you, Gunjan, and welcome to what I would like to call it the practical session. I'll walk you through the purpose of the tool, then give you a brief overview of how to use the tool before inviting you to the different breakout sessions to test a portion of the tool on your own. The purpose of the CLD assessment tool evolved as much as this collaborative research evolved. The tool was initially created by the group members to review the pool of evaluations that we were provided by different organizations. Earlier this morning, Gunjan walked us through some of the results that came from the first use of the tool. So what you see in that report has come from us actually using this tool. Our group has since incorporated feedback and learning from the advisors, several early adopters, or what we would like to call as test drivers. And then in the current form, the tool enables organizations to assess and recalibrate the CLD programming to showcase how CLD, their approach is, and over time help us create standards for CLD as we conduct and share more analytical reviews beyond just one project. And we do similar exercises that cover portfolios of programs. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So the uses. The tool is designed in the fancy Excel platform, and this is for ease of use, to use it offline, to download or print it and make it accessible to everyone. We have an accompanying guidance documents that goes along with it, which it's for use. The tool can be used as a self-assessment internally by a project or a program, but also as participatory review through a group exercise with program staff, community leaders, community members. Additionally, it can be used by external consultants or for a portfolio review. And we recommend always that the more views you include as you use the tool, the better it is. So our recommendation would be to use this as in a participatory way. Reviewers' ratings are usually based on documentations, being that an evaluation or an annual report, or existing data from other sources. And we also recommend meetings with the teams and community members as you review this evaluations or program documents, which is something that we weren't able to do, unfortunately, at this point in time. Next slide, please. So what do we have currently? After piloting, beta testing, and considering all the feedback from the various M&E and program professionals, CLD and CDD, community-led development, community-driven development experts, and academics, many of whom are in this call today, we are ready to launch the tools in English and French. The tools are available on the movement website. There is a Spanish version that will come in December 2021. And given the diversity of the programming, the tools are designed as a rubric. The reason why we went for a rubric is because it helps stakeholders build a shared understanding on what success looks like, while allowing us to think of a range of characteristics and also the overlap between some of the characteristics. It also allows to assess different levels of progress and map a progress, if you wanted, a progress journey for that. There are 9 dimensions and 11 characteristics. We have divided them in the CLD assessment tool that it's focused on the practice on 2 sections, one that deals with characteristics and the other one that deals with processes. So next slide. When we go in the working group, in the breakout groups, this is what essentially you will be looking at. This is what the rubric looks like in Excel. Every dimension has categories based on how that dimension may appear in a program lifecycle. For each category, you can choose a rating from 0 to 4 based on where you feel your program is. And if a category or characteristics is not relevant based on your circumstances, you can put a note and explaining it. Each dimension in the rubric includes different statements and possible responses. As much as possible, we have looked that those categories are mutually exclusive, so that you can find yourself easier, you can place yourself easier in a category, but also allow for some feedback and also different views, because it's a rubric and it is based on various people's perceptions and views on where the program is. You can choose a response, insufficient information. You can put a 0. If you think that the program doesn't even try to do CLD or this doesn't even cover this characteristics, you can give a 1, and so on and forth. The scores that will be entered in the gray box that are on the right corner, and the rubric automatically calculates the total scores for each dimension and gives an idea of the sub dimensions. And the responses, you see the tabs at the very bottom. The tab 3 includes the rubric's overall results, and tab 4 provides a breakdown of the different components summarizing the CLD characteristics. Tab 5 provides even additional breakdown, but more if you're looking at how CLD is your M&E practice and your facilitation. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So what you will essentially end up looking at when the results are populated, it's something like this. Here you can see automatically, for example, when we're looking at the characteristics diagram on your left, how your program, is working pretty well when it comes to sub-national government involvement and recognizing and respecting local resources and knowledge. However, you may also see that when you're doing well on accountability, participation, responsiveness, based on this hypothetical context. But you may also see that some of your dimensions are low. As you see, they are not in the outer rim of the spider. And that means that, for example, you need to ensure communities are part of your exit strategies, which you may not have started to think about, or that your M&E practice in support of CLD needs to ensure collaboration within the and amongst the communities in the other spider. Now you may have to work in a if you work in a highly divided society or in a conflict zone, some dimensions, for example, the dimension F in this, that is collaboration, might not be feasible. So you may be okay where you see the spider diagram to show that dimension. So as you can see, you can play a lot more with, and there is some flexibility on how we use it. This is what I had to share, and rather than actually deal with PowerPoints, it is best if we break into groups. Gunjan, will someone let us know about the group breakout?
Yes, yes, Holta. I will just take everyone through the breakout groups. So thank you. This was to give you an overview of what the tool is, but as Holta said, the real experience is using the tool. So what we are going to do now is that we are going to break everyone into breakout groups. We have one in French and the rest will be in English. And over the next 30 minutes, you're going to assume that you are a group of stakeholders at an annual gathering of, an annual monitoring or evaluation or annual reflections exercise, really, for the program. So you will each be given a case study, and in your groups, in the 30 minutes, you will apply a part of this tool, one dimension, to that case study and see what this process is like. How do you arrive at the score? What is the rubric like when you actually apply it? What do the results look like when you actually apply it? John, do we have the slide on? Can we have the slide on the breakout groups on, please? And we are going to be sharing, so the case studies are available at this. I'm sharing a link for the case studies. Everybody should be able to open the case studies, and your facilitator will let you know which is your case study. So you can just read that in your breakout groups. And then when you come back, we can have any questions about the tool and any feedback that you have. So 30 minutes. Izzy, are the breakout groups ready?
Yes, they are. I will open them up now.
Okay, so everybody in breakout groups, we'll see you back in 30 minutes here, and you will get a notification that says so.